Our story begins on Coruscant as the Republic capital is under attack. For so many of the citizens here on the city planet, this was unimaginable. The Clone Wars have been going on for over 3 long years, and the majority of the last year was spent pushing the Separatists into the Outer Rim. So this attack was horrible, as everyone was unprepared. Millions were trying to get to safety as vulture droids circled through the skies. Droid landing crafts set down in the city on top of homes and buildings as battle droids poured into the streets. It didn't make any sense. How could the tide of the war have just shifted so suddenly? So many people here were in denial, thinking this was all just some bad dream, or that it would be over very soon. But one senator, Padme Amidala of Naboo, had seen more of this war than almost anyone else, and she knew one thing for certain. Despite how Dooku presents himself to the galaxy as some peaceful, charismatic diplomat, she knows the Separatists are merciless, and this attack will cost the lives of so many. She was in her home when C-3PO scrambled inside, telling her that the evacuation shuttle will be here momentarily. Padme thanked the droid, and she quickly moved over to her hologram communicator. She missed Anakin so much, she desperately wished he was here to keep her and everyone else safe. She knew she was elsewhere in the galaxy, keeping others safe, and she just wanted to speak with him. So Padme flicked on the communicator, hoping for an answer. But there wasn't one. Wherever Anakin was, he was clearly busy. But Padme spoke her feelings into the communicator anyways. She knew she may never get to see him again, so she just let it all out, all of her love, everything she felt. And soon, Padme would hear an explosion. She looked out of her window to see that a vulture droid was just shot down, and it was spiraling right towards her home. There was no time to escape, so Padme just told the recording device that she will always love Anakin, and she will always be with him, and she gripped the necklace that Anakin made for her so long ago, as she said one final thing that Anakin would hopefully someday hear, as the vulture droid crashed right into her home, and explosions rang through the building. Above Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker was flying side by side with Obi-Wan Kenobi, as the two of them were speeding through the waves of droid ships, trying to get to the Invisible Hand flagship, where Palpatine was hopefully being held. They had no confirmation the Chancellor was alive, but Anakin was going to do everything in his power to get there in time. His need to save everyone was what drove Anakin all throughout this war. The fear of losing his brother, his best friend, Obi-Wan, was unbearable, and the thought of losing Palpatine, the man who has been like a father to Anakin, always there to help, was simply not an option. He needed to save the Chancellor. Anakin noticed a pair of missiles locked onto him, so he spun his ship around until the missiles collided, and R2 chirped with excitement. Anakin laughed with him, and they kept flying, but suddenly, something hit Anakin. It was like he could feel the pain on Coruscant. Obi-Wan spoke in his comlink, asking Anakin if he was alright. Anakin's ship came to a strange halt in space, but Anakin said he was fine. He just had a bad feeling for a moment. But all of a sudden, Anakin couldn't get the face of his mother out of his head. Usually, when in battle, on a mission, or even in front of the Jedi Council, Anakin could forget about his deep fears of loss. But at night, when he was all alone, the walls Anakin built in his head would begin to freeze over, and Anakin would be reminded of how he held his dying mother in his arms, of how she spent her last strength to say, "I love." And at night, Anakin is reminded that he will eventually lose everything, as even stars burn out. Anakin wasn't sure why right now he was remembering his mother's death. It was strange, but he forced himself to shake it off. Palpatine needs him, and Padme is waiting for him. So Anakin and Obi-Wan, the two most famous Jedi in the galaxy, would soon board the Invisible Hand flagship, find Palpatine waiting for them. Anakin felt so much relief when he saw the Chancellor alive. He wasn't too late this time. Maybe things were turning in his favor. And so, when Dooku arrived to confront the two Jedi, Anakin knew one thing for certain. He may be the only thing standing in the way of Dooku killing both Palpatine and Obi-Wan. So as the three of them dueled, and Dooku eventually threw Obi-Wan to the side, something was awakened in Anakin. The need to save and protect his friends overtook Anakin's heart, and he became a machine in the Force, using his gift of fury to clash with Dooku again and again. But with every step, even as Dooku was being pushed back and overwhelmed, dread was beginning to creep into Dooku as he realized something. Despite all of this, Skywalker was still holding back. So Dooku decided to trust his master still had a plan for him, and he was goading Anakin more and more into the darkness. so Anakin kept swinging at Dooku, and Anakin allowed himself just a moment of freedom in battle, a moment to let his true power shine, and he sliced through Dooku's wrists, had him on knees with his two lightsabers crossed at his neck. And as much as Anakin knew what was right and wrong, he almost couldn't help himself, as Palpatine told him to kill Dooku. Anakin snipped the blades, and he murdered the Sith Lord in cold blood. It was not the Jedi way, but Anakin forced himself to forget about it by saving Obi-Wan as they ran through this exploding ship. After some events typical for a Skywalker Kenobi rescue, involving elevators, gravity generators, and a duel with General Grievous, Anakin was forced to land this ship into the Coruscant landing strip, as he was able to save both Obi-Wan and Palpatine, while still landing just half of the ship. As the ship stopped, Anakin felt so much relief, not just because he and his friends were alive, but because he was finally going to get to see his wife, Padme. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Palpatine were taken on a shuttle back to the executive building, and Obi-Wan told Anakin to go on with the politicians, as he's not quite brave enough for politics, and the two of them shared a nice moment as Anakin ran over to the senators, scanning for his wife. But she was nowhere to be found. A pit began to form in Anakin's stomach. He tried to force it down, but that pit turned into a dragon made of fear, as Bail Organa sadly beckoned Anakin over to him. Anakin got to Bail, asking what was going on, and all Bail could do was shake his head and say he was so sorry. Anakin refused to believe it was true. He demanded to know where Padme was. Bail told Anakin which hospital Padme was brought to. He was just with her, and she asked for Anakin. Anakin had to hide away his fear. He would go save her. He had to. So he sprinted to the nearest speeder, got into it, and he flew into the traffic. And also outside of the executive building, Obi-Wan was watching Anakin. He wanted to see his former students happily find Padme. He knew about them, deep down, but when Obi-Wan saw Anakin panic and hurry away, he turned to the pilot of this transport, and he ordered the pilot to follow Anakin. So the transport did follow Anakin through the Coruscant traffic, moving past many people in the skies, until the transport landed at the most prestigious hospital on Coruscant, and Obi-Wan ran after Anakin as he sprinted inside of the building. As Anakin ran through the halls, he felt the furnace of fear burning inside of him. He can't lose Padme. He can't. Anakin just spent the last 5 months away from her, constantly in battle, fighting every day to end the war for her, so they could live their perfect dream lives together on Naboo. But Anakin's worst fears were realized as he ran into the main room where Padme was laying on a bed. She was terribly wounded and seemingly on her final breaths. But Anakin got to her side, gripping her hand. Anakin felt her grip it back. She barely opened her eyes, and Anakin felt a touch of hope. But Padme was just waiting for him before she let go. She said, "I love..." And before the final word could escape her mouth, Padme died in Anakin's arms. And suddenly Anakin was back on Tatooine, holding his mother. He vowed that day to never be too weak again. He promised to save everyone. But again, he failed. And Anakin felt that same feeling from Tatooine rising up in him again. The darkness, the hatred, the anger. Anakin turned, storming out of the door, not quite sure where he was going. But as he exited, Anakin saw Obi-Wan standing there, and all the feelings of anger and hatred melted into pure sadness and grief as Anakin fell into his master's arms, crying, saying he was too weak, and Obi-Wan promised to stay here with him. The next day would be extremely rough for Anakin, but he would eventually find himself back at the Jedi Temple with Obi-Wan. He and Obi-Wan were delivering the official mission report to the Council about rescuing Palpatine and defeating Dooku, as the war was the only thing that could ever really distract Anakin, so he was just continuing to focus on the war. Grievous was out there, and deep down, Anakin wanted to completely destroy the droid general. He was blaming Grievous for killing Padme, as he was the one who orchestrated the attack on Coruscant. Anakin vowed to himself that he would honor Padme by bringing an end to this war and bringing peace to the galaxy, whatever it may take. The Jedi Council knew something was extremely off with Anakin, and Obi-Wan would inform a few of the members in private of Padme's death. Windu was saddened by Padme's death as well, but as a Jedi, he allowed her to pass out of his life. Obi-Wan, Yoda, and the others were able to do this as well. It didn't mean they didn't care for her, rather they understood that death is a natural part of life. But of course, none of them had a relationship anywhere even close to what Anakin had with her. It was not so easy for Anakin. It wasn't easy at all. In fact, it was impossible. But Obi-Wan knew what it was like to lose the woman he loves. Satine died in his arms during this war, and Obi-Wan forced himself to reject the darkness in that moment. Sometimes, Obi-Wan would remember that moment, and he would recall the feeling deep inside of him as Maul stood over him and Satine, gloating about killing her. It was like there was a dark serpent deep down in Obi-Wan, begging to be let free. But Obi-Wan was a Jedi. He would always be a Jedi. He knew how to acknowledge those feelings and hide them away, whereas Anakin had to hide them, or else the darkness in him could take over. In Council, Anakin would ask the Council members for a mission. Any mission. He just wants to keep pushing forward, end this war, and they are so close to all of it being over now that Dooku is gone. So Windu and the Council would indeed give Anakin a new mission. Spy on Chancellor Palpatine. Something is off with him, and the Council has tied their investigations of Darth Sidious all the way to 500 Republica, the building where Palpatine lives. The Council said it's possible that Sidious is manipulating Palpatine, whether the Chancellor knows it or not, and they need Anakin to find out the truth, as he is the closest one to Palpatine in the entire order. And although part of Anakin felt wrong taking this secret mission, he ended up taking it anyways, as he was still keeping his promise to end this war. If there was possibly some way to end it by spying on Palpatine, then that is what he would do. But before embarking on this mission, Anakin would try to get any sleep inside of his temple quarters. Of course, he couldn't do it. The faces of his mother and of Padme were flashing by him, both of them dying in his arms, and Anakin ended up spending the night just staring out of his window, wishing he could get them back. He would do anything to get them back. His Jedi communicator had recently recorded messages from Naboo, but Anakin could not bring himself to listen to them. He knew it was Padme's family reaching out to him, but Anakin couldn't bear to even face them, as he was not strong enough to save their daughter. So Anakin just waited for morning, and when it came, he began his mission to Palpatine's office. The first thing Palpatine did was apologize for Padme's tragic death, as he knew how close the two of them were. Deep down, Palpatine really was discouraged by Padme's death, as she was going to be a key part to bringing Anakin to the dark side. But he's been adjusting to this galaxy, throwing things in his way for decades. He would not fail to finish his plan in these final days. So Palpatine would begin dropping subtle hints that there was a deeper power, asking Anakin if he found something in his fight with Dooku. Anakin said that he reached into a power that was forbidden for a Jedi, and it's not something he plans to do again. Something just overcame him in that moment. But Palpatine said that perhaps that power was only the beginning, and maybe that power is something that could save people in the future. Perhaps even bring people back. Anakin considered this, and he did tell Palpatine he knows there are things about the Force that the Jedi are not telling him. Palpatine smiled to himself. He could tell Anakin was thinking about the darkness, wondering if he should go back to it. And so Palpatine wanted to do more to push Anakin over the edge. He informed the boy that Grievous has been discovered on Utapau, and he should deliver that information to the Council, saying that the Council would be wise to choose Anakin for this mission. Anakin agreed with that, and he thanked Palpatine before taking off back to the temple to inform the Council of Grievous's location. But when the Council heard this, they barely even considered Anakin for the mission. Instead, they chose Obi-Wan. But Obi-Wan actually ended up declining, as he said he was feeling under the weather and wouldn't be able to bring his best against the droid general. So the Council looked around again and ultimately decided that Kit Fisto and Saesee Tiin will lead this mission. It was settled then, and Anakin would go back to his temple quarters. Obi-Wan watched his former students, and he followed him through the temple halls. He wouldn't tell anyone, but he declined the mission to Utapau because he was worried about Anakin. He also knew that Padme's family was trying to reach out to Anakin for something important, but Anakin was not responding. The funeral for Padme was also being set up on Naboo, and Anakin was refusing to acknowledge this. He was burying all of his feelings, and Obi-Wan was extremely worried that they were all going to explode all in one moment. So he knocked on Anakin's door, and he told him about the funeral, and also about Padme's family trying to reach him. Anakin said that they don't have time for that stuff. They're chasing down Darth Sidious, and if he loses focus of this task, then they could lose the war. Obi-Wan asked him if that was really the reason he was refusing to acknowledge Padme's death, and Anakin just told him to drop it, saying he has to go back to Palpatine's office. Anakin brushed by Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan watched him go. Anakin would fly back to Palpatine's office, frustrated with the Council for not sending him to Utapau, basically just angry at the galaxy, and he was ready to vent to Palpatine even though he was supposed to be spying on him. And as Anakin flew through the Coruscant skies, he flew by Padme's home, which was now being sorted through for her belongings, and Anakin forced himself to just look away. But inside of the home, R2-D2 was here to help with the cleanup. The first thing R2 did was find C-3PO's droid body in about 10 different pieces, and after a while of annoying repairs, R2 was able to put 3PO back together. The protocol droid woke up, looked around in a panicked confusion, until R2 begrudgingly informed him that everything was alright. He was safe now. 3PO thanked R2 for fixing him, and R2 chirped his response to give a snarky sort of "you're welcome," and the astromech continued searching through the rubble until he found something else. Padme's communicator with a saved message on it. R2 flicked it on, and he sadly watched as the holograms of Padme Amidala in her final moments began expressing her love for Anakin. She ended it with a message that shocked even R2, and the little droid knew that Anakin had to see this immediately. And R2 looked out of the window as Anakin's speeder flew by, headed straight for the executive building. So R2 pulled the recording, and he put it into his own projector, then flew out of the window on his rocket jets, following Anakin to give him this message. And in the executive building office, Palpatine knew that now was the time to act on his final steps of his plan. He told Anakin the Council does not trust him, but he has felt his power. He touched only the iceberg of what he can accomplish if he just allows himself to use even an ounce of his true power. Anakin did remember how easily he was able to defeat Dooku with his power, but after a bit more of this manipulation, Palpatine would reveal the truth. He said that only through him, Anakin learned the power not only to save people from dying, but perhaps he can learn to bring people back. But as Palpatine was unraveling who he truly was, Anakin's mind began to center on one specific thing: the attack on Coruscant. If Palpatine is Sidious, and he was Dooku's master, then that means he ordered the attack on Coruscant. That means it was Palpatine who basically caused Padme to die. So as Palpatine was continuing to speak, Anakin wasn't hearing him anymore. He pulled out his blue lightsaber, ignited it with a sharp hiss, and he told Palpatine he's going to kill him. Palpatine's lips formed into an extremely joyful, creepy smile as he told Anakin this was good. Use his anger, use his hatred, use his rage as his weapon. And the first lesson to Anakin could be the last lesson that Sidious ever gives, as Anakin now focused his fear and turned it into his own weapon. And Sidious immediately realized that he may already be dead. He pushed Anakin too far. Sidious did pull out his saber, and the Jedi and the Sith were now spinning, whirling, crashing together, slashing, chopping, parrying, ripping through the air around them with snarls of pure power. A nuclear flame has consumed Anakin's Jedi restraint, and his fear became fury without effort. And fury was the blade that made his saber into just another part of him. Sidious's decades of combat experience had become irrelevant. Even his knowledge of the Force was now just a joke. With every strike from Palpatine, Anakin saw the faces of his mother and of Padme, telling him he will never be strong enough, and these evil nightmares fueled Anakin until he simply decides to win, to embrace the power within him. So Anakin elbowed Sidious in the face and sliced through both of his wrists like he did with Dooku. Anakin kicked Sidious so hard into the wall that he knocked out the Sith Lord completely unconscious, so Anakin was free to kill him. The Jedi lifted his blue blade for the cold-blooded kill, a kill that could cement him in the dark side for good, as there was no going back if he did this. But from the doorway, Obi-Wan ran in, and he told Anakin to stop. He followed Anakin here, but it was too late. Anakin slammed Obi-Wan back through the office door with the Force, and the Jedi Master tumbled away with fear. And in the hallway, though, Obi-Wan looked at the staircase as R2-D2 flew up and chirped, asking where Anakin was. Obi-Wan was shocked to see the little droid here, but perhaps he could still save Anakin. So Obi-Wan took this chance, pushing R2 into the room and in the office. As Anakin was about to swing down and kill Sidious, embrace his darkness for good, he heard a familiar voice. It was Padme, and she greeted Anakin with the warmth Anakin loved so much. Anakin paused with his blade in the air as he looked over to R2-D2, who was playing the hologram recording of Padme right before her death. Anakin's eyes immediately welled up with tears as Padme smiled at him through the hologram, saying she doesn't know if she will ever see him again, but she just wanted to record this in hopes that maybe someday he will see it if she doesn't survive the battle. Padme expressed how she loves Anakin for who he is, and although of course he has his faults, it's his capacity for joy, his cleansing laughter, extraordinary spirit, and his gentle devotion to her and every living being that makes him perfect. Padme told Anakin that she is so proud of him for who he has become, and every day she reminds herself that Anakin needs to be a Jedi, because saving people is what he was born for. She continued on, telling Anakin to continue being himself for her and for their child. Padme put a hand to her stomach and smiled, telling Anakin that yes, she is pregnant, and it was in this moment that Anakin finally realized why Padme's family was so urgently trying to get in contact with him. Anakin could feel it. He had a child. No, he had 2 children. They were alive. He knew it. And Anakin dropped his blade, falling to his knees as the hologram told Anakin she loves him forever and she will always be with him. The darkness washed away from Anakin, and Obi-Wan entered back in, putting Palpatine in handcuffs, and he told Anakin to go to Naboo. Anakin genuinely thanked Obi-Wan, and together, he and R2 took off to Naboo. Palpatine would be arrested and taken back to the Jedi Temple, as the Council would work on a way to inform the Senate about Palpatine and his crimes. But for Anakin, that was the least of his worries, as he landed outside of the Amidala Nebery home and sprinted to the door, where Padme's mother and father greeted him with a hug, then guided Anakin inside of a nursery home, where young Luke and Leia were lying together. Anakin discovered that after Padme's accident, the doctors on Coruscant were able to help her give birth before she passed away, and Anakin never found out because Padme wasn't able to tell him, and her family couldn't get in communication with him, and Padme of course couldn't tell the doctors that Anakin was the father. That would violate their secrecy. So as Anakin sat and he held his twin children, he never felt more in the light, and he could imagine Padme smiling down on them. He promised now to watch over the twins for the rest of his life, making sure they get the life they deserve, and Padme's family was more than willing to help. With Anakin here on Naboo, he was able to center himself, focus on helping put together the funeral. It would be an event that everyone on Naboo would hear about, and so many would be in attendance. When it began, Padme was celebrated and mourned through the city, with Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan guiding her to the tomb where she would rest. It wasn't easy for Anakin, obviously, but he was able to get through it, and every single day that Anakin spent on Naboo raising his children, he would start it by visiting the tomb and telling Padme all about their children. Someday they would be trained in the Force, but now they were raised here as Padme wanted. And elsewhere in the galaxy, Grievous was officially defeated. Darth Sidious was forever locked in the Mandalorian vault, as Maul was transported to a maximum security prison, with his Force powers being constantly drained to keep him at bay. The Sith were locked down for good, and the Skywalker name was celebrated as Anakin grew with his children. R2-D2, C-3PO, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Rex, and many others would visit him, and Anakin's joy would return to him, with the light of his children helping him in ways that they could never even understand. And folks, that is our story for today. This is one I really enjoyed. So, yeah, hope you guys really enjoyed this one as well, or just even slightly enjoyed it. Bit of a sad, dramatic one. I don't know, I was listening to the, I know that you guys are going to be shocked by this, but I was actually listening to the Revenge of the Sith novelization. What? Me? Anyways, and I was like, hey, I want to do something with R2-D2. I want to do something with Padme. So, yeah, I mean, I guess Padme was dead. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought. Yeah. What do you guys want to see next? I've got some ideas, so appreciate you guys for listening. And I'll see you in the next video.